Hello, I'm Hilton Super, the Vice Chairman of Studium Group. I'm looking forward to interviewing Humpty Calderon today, who's the head of community at Ontology, where we interview people who are changing the world, people that are inspiring us with their achievements and creativity and acumen, the use of technology. In previous interviews, Dinesh Guarda and I have interviewed over 200 amazing people and achieved more than 12 million views on YouTube. This interview series on Citiesabc is in partnership with our other platforms, openbusinesscouncil.org and fashionabc.org, all fourth industrial revolution platforms, and Web3 utilizing technologies that employ the use of truth and trust through the use of blockchain and the development of data analytics, AI, and machine learning. So today, Humpty Calderon, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Humpty, you're head of community at Ontology, and the project is designed to really bring trust, privacy, and security to Web3 through decentralized identity and data solutions. In terms of your experience, tell us a little bit about what your journey was like to get you here today.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I guess I can just briefly touch on what I was doing prior to coming into the space of Web3, if that's okay.
Yeah.
My background is in information technology. And so as such, I was working as an IT person at different companies, eventually creating and operating my own IT consultancy. So when I learned of Bitcoin and I learned of the Web3 stack, I saw the parallels quite simply and quickly in terms of the parallels between the two. But the opportunities available with this blockchain technology to be able to scale in a much larger, impactful way than what you could with the traditional tech stack. So I became kind of enamored with this idea of Bitcoin, and eventually, I invested in a little bit into it, but really wanted to learn more about what the technology was beyond just being a speculator. So meetups played a very important role in my entry into the space of Web3. I would attend meetups, and at those meetups is when I actually met my first founders, where we created the first business, my first business in the space of Web3 in 2016. And that business is Sesameseed. Through that business, what we were doing is we were running a validator network, so nodes across a variety of delegated proof of stake chains, and Ontology was one of them. We operated nodes across 7 or 8 chains. I can't remember exactly now. And what we were doing is we were providing community members with the tools to be able to delegate their tokens and earn rewards from them. But beyond pure token delegation, we were providing them additional value with other tools that we were creating for them. And so this is pre-DAOs, at least as we know them now. So a lot of the tooling we had to create from scratch. In 2020, that business got acquired. I was looking for new opportunities in the space of Web3. I wanted to learn about something that people weren't really talking about yet, and one of those things was decentralized identity. And being that I already had a connection with Ontology, I knew the people at Ontology. It was really easy for me to be able to connect with them, ask questions, and I was offered an opportunity to join as a contributor. And of course, I jumped at the opportunity because I wanted to learn more about what this novel, very obscure technology of decentralized identity was. And so here we are today.
Brilliant. So taking one step backwards, when you were being at school and through your university, where was that?
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, okay.
Yeah. So I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. I've gotten away from LA for a little bit, but come back. And in addition to traditional schooling, I've also taken classes at some Ivy League universities that are more specific to topics that are relevant and important to bridge kind of some of what is happening in the space of Web3 with more traditional education.
Absolutely. So were you very much interested in technology when you were at university and at school?
I would say I've always been interested in technology. I remember when I was a wee kid, I used to break apart my parents' radio and put it back together. So I've always been a hacker at heart. One of the influential publications in my childhood was 2100 magazine. So if anybody doesn't know, look that up. It's an old hacker magazine. It still gets published now, but I think it's a lot, very watered down. Back in the day, I remember they used to actually give you recipes to develop viruses, credit card algorithms to create credit card numbers. And it was just really an interesting exposure to something that was, not normally provided to you as far as education goes. So, I remember going to my local Radio Shack and buying hardware and soldering equipment to make black boxes and blue boxes and silver boxes, everything, just because I was always interested in how electronics worked. I was interested in how communications worked. I remember hacking phone systems, all this stuff. I did it as a kid just to really learn and educate myself on how technology worked. So when I became of age to go to the university, it just was an easy choice for me to go and pursue an education in information technology.
Brilliant. But in terms of information technology, you bridged the gap between both, analog to digital.
Yeah. I mean, I think information technology is more architecture than anything else. You're developing the systems for how hardware and software can communicate with one another. So that was also fun. I got to get, still be involved in soldering boards when I needed to for hardware systems. But the more fun part was like actually learning how software itself was starting to scale out, software as a service, looking at cloud systems, cloud architecture. And so, yeah, my kind of education continued even outside of the university because technology just never stops.
Did you buy your first computer or did you build it?
So my parents bought me my first computer at the age of 13. But as soon as I figured out that it was, what the world of PC building was, I went to my local Fry's Electronics. So if anybody who lives in LA knows that was where you went and bought all the hardware that you needed. And there were such amazing people there that helped you just discover just so much different types of hardware. And yeah, I would literally write out all the specifications of what I wanted, and I come back and put it together. In fact, the computer that's sitting next to me over there, not my laptop, but my PC, is the last one that I built, and that's my VR rig.
Really?
Yeah.
Trusted workhorse for you then.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's got way too many graphic cards in there, but it's fun.
Oh, excellent. So once you were, Sesameseed, you were talking about you had started working there, then you started connecting with Ontology. When you came to Ontology, what was the mission that you were really wanting to fulfill at Ontology?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was an opportunity to learn from experts about something, like I said, that was very obscure. I still think that it's very obscure. People probably talk about decentralized identity more now than ever, but I don't necessarily think that many people still understand the nuance of decentralized identity. It is actually one of the reasons why I'm very excited to see so many people building in this space, because identity, and decentralized identity even more so, is a very complex subject. It's so many different facets of it that one organization, one individual cannot solve all of it. So yeah, joining Ontology for me was learning from the best. Ontology, even before they launched their blockchain, were members of the Decentralized Identity Foundation, contributing to that space of the decentralized identity. So they've been doing it for a long time. It's not something that they're just talking about or have passing knowledge on. They have experts there, and yeah, it's very exciting to be able to learn from them.
Yeah. So for the benefit of our viewers, can you explain a little bit about digital identity? What is it? How important is it? And what's the utility in it?
Yeah, so I mean, digital identity and decentralized identity are two very different things, right? So digital identity, I mean, anybody who has an email has a digital identity, right? It is your persona in the metaverse, if you will, right? So how can people identify you? How can people communicate with you? If you game online, you have a digital identity, right? Like a persona that people don't know who you are, but people know that name, username. They're able to interact with it. They're able to you're able to accrue points, right? You earn a reputation in that space. Decentralized identity uses identifiers, open standards to generate identifiers that are not gated to any one particular platform. So they are multi-platform, they're chain agnostic even, if we're talking about blockchain specific. So in another example of a digital identity and not decentralized identity would be your Web3 wallet. If you download MetaMask, set up your private key or your seed phrase, generate a wallet, that is, for all intents and purposes, your digital identity. People see your interactions based on that wallet, token holdings, participation in governance contracts, et cetera, et cetera. Decentralized identity is one step removed from that. It actually is able to hold multiple wallets within a decentralized identifier. So you're able to bind all of these different identities under one like parent identity, if you will. And this is able to cross across different blockchains. They don't even have to be EVM compatible. And the other cool thing about decentralized identifiers that your traditional digital identity doesn't have, if we're talking about Web3 wallets specifically, is verifiable credentials. So these are private proofs that attest to you having something, either ownership of something or completion of something. A verifiable credential could be a proof that you've completed your university studies at, some prestigious college and received some certification with X type of grades. All of this can be recorded. It's not on chain. It is something that lives off chain. It's self-sovereign, as they say. It's owned by you, and you can reveal that information as you see fit.
And can you, if you have your digital identity, which has various sub-wallets, as you were describing, or sub-identities of you, holding maybe one set of your financial information, one holding information on your social media identity, one your avatar, et cetera, are you able to switch on and switch off which bit people can see?
Oh, 100%. So I'm just going to give you an example of like how I operate in the Web3 space. I do not use the same wallet for everything. I use one wallet to be a NFT degenerate, buying things and, just buying first, thinking last. I have one where I simply use it for participating in governance and DAOs. I have one where I hold certain tokens that I find valuable, but don't want that relationship, connected to any of my other identities. I have one that I just use to sign multi-sigs. Whenever someone needs a transaction approved, there's a wallet that I use specifically for that. I don't want the relationships of these identities to be revealed to the other identities of people that know who I am, as far as like, oh, Humpty owns that wallet. I don't necessarily need that or want that for just privacy reasons, and that's my choice. When it comes to binding those wallets in my decentralized identity, that relationship is not revealed. That relationship is private. It's encrypted. It's owned by me, right? Now, in terms of how I decide to show up in any particular instance, I show up the same way that I would traditionally using Web3 wallets. So the decentralized identifier is just a way to be able to hold them together, like I said, a parent identity. But the way I show up is still through these different Web3 wallets and the way that I would normally.
So when you show up, people know it's you.
I mean, as far as like, 0x and all of this huge sequence of numbers afterwards, that's Humpty, because he's been, I know that he is showing up as this multi-sig signer because we have him written in some sort of like documentation that that's his wallet in case, hey, we need Humpty to sign that transaction. People know who I am and how to reach me. And it's that revealing of, the connection between me and my digital identity, my physical persona and my digital persona, that is okay, but that's what I don't want basically muddied up with everything else that I do.
I do understand. But if you think about the digital Web3 world, which has got multiple chains on it, how can your digital identity be interoperable across all these different?
Yeah, so if you think about Web3 wallets traditionally, they are siloed within a blockchain, right? So I can't take my Ethereum Web3 wallet and use it at Ontology. or I can't use my Ontology wallet and use it on Near protocol. That doesn't work, right? Mm-hmm. Decentralized identifiers are not limited by that same type of gate or silos. They are interoperable. As long as these DIDs or DIDs have been implemented across all of these different blockchains, they're usable across all these different blockchains. A good example is, anyone can contest me on this, but I'm confident in what I'm about to say. Ontology's DID method is the most widely distributed DID. It's been implemented, I believe, anywhere between 8 and 10 blockchains. That's huge. Most DIDs are anywhere between 1 and maybe 3. And if I say 3, I might be exaggerating. It might be 2 at most. Okay. So Ontology has gone through great effort to be able to create an interoperable identity that you're able to use across different blockchains. Mm-hmm. So that, and here's the other key part, if you choose to generate some reputation, you're able to do so comprehensively and not just limited by activities in one blockchain, right? Mm-hmm. I can say, if someone was asking for all the NFT degenerates to show up, I can be like, I have about 10 wallets that I use across different blockchains. They're all NFT degenerate identities. I want to bring them together through one identity, like a decentralized identity, to be able to then create a comprehensive score of my reputation as an NFT degenerate, right? So, and I should say degen because degenerate sounds terrible, but you know what I mean. Because degens are degenerates, but supposedly degens is a much more palatable way of kind of saying that you're just not very thoughtful about, kind of the potential outcomes of your actions when you're just buying different NFTs, for instance.
Yeah, but that's just like for most people going shopping on a Saturday morning,
Yeah.
Just to, you can go and buy your clothing or your watch or whatever just because you feel like it. You just it's a passion wallet.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny you say that, because I would say that by contrast, my clothing is very limited. I probably have like a lot of the same clothes and very few of those things that I wear regularly. And my wife always looks at me like, man, your closet is like so empty. I was like, yeah, because I don't need a lot of things. I typically wear the same things over and over. As long as they're clean, it's fine. But when it comes to other things like, my digital self, it's very different. It is more of a collector identity. But for me, more it's about experimentation. There's just so much new novelty in this space that I want to make sure that I am participating in it so that I can also learn.
Yeah. You talk a lot about decentralized, having this interoperability of, say, the ontology identity across chains. It's a bit of a more philosophical question. This should be because imagine, you have your financial wallet, which has got all your KYC and financial stuff that you can sign stuff on your behalf with using this wallet. Why is it that the financial industry, the banks and that are so frightened of this technology, in your opinion?
I don't necessarily think they're frightened by it. There was a certain level of adoption of blockchain technology. While sometimes I think banks say something publicly, they definitely act very different. I wouldn't say privately because you can find this information. But I think, it's a very novel space and there's a lot of experimentation going on. And if I were to make a guess as to why banks are not as aggressive in their strategy to implement these things, it's because, it's a very traditional space that has legacy rules and regulations where they have to move slowly. Because if they break things, it can affect things globally. We just saw what happened with Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank and all of these different things that happened over the course of a week or so. Is the effect that has across the global economy has a much larger impact than if it's constrained within a small niche space as crypto is. Because as much as I think we talk about adoption in crypto, we're nowhere close to reaching a level of adoption, because it's still a very few number of people with many different wallets. As I've just, kind of shared, I have multiple identities. So I wouldn't say that just because I have 20 different wallets, that 20 different people have adopted this. Is still just a single person, right? Mm-hmm. So I feel like banks need to be a bit more careful, and I would say traditional finance needs to be a bit more careful about the things that they decide to implement. But I don't necessarily think that, traditional finance needs to adopt or accept this emergent technology. I think DeFi is doing pretty damn good without it. The only thing that I see as an issue are the on-ramps and off-ramps to crypto. We still depend very much on traditional banking systems. I know me, whether it is, something that I've earned based on investments that I made, or something that I've earned based on work that I've done, I still need to put that in a traditional bank to pay my bills, right? To pay my mortgage, to pay my car payment, my insurance, all these things. So until there is real adoption between crypto and, I maybe should say, decentralized finance and the traditional payment systems, or there is that adoption from traditional finance for crypto, it's still going to be a very difficult space to get any true adoption. My wife, she looks at me and says, I trust what you're doing. If you believe in it and you know what the heck you're doing, go for it. But she's not going to come in here and start doing what I'm doing, because she's, more, she's not as risk averse, or she's more risk averse, I would say, than me. I take a lot more risks. So, and I would say the majority of people are that way. I know you were looking at my LinkedIn profile, I think, and looking at some of my previous employment. I remember to them, when I was still working at an office, saying, hey, y'all know what's going on in the space of, and fill in the emerging technology here. I was very much into virtual reality and augmented reality for a moment. And I was bringing that type of thinking and process for them. And they're like, no, not for us. And I'm like, y'all know what's happening with Bitcoin, right? No, not for us. You know what's happening with like DAOs and NFTs? No, not for me. And now they want to adopt all these things, but they're a little behind, because there's a lot of other early adopters that have been able to kind of take some sort of, get some footing in the space, but not too late. But it's really interesting to see how long that curve takes to come around for someone to go, oh, that's way too, emergent, or whatever you want to call it, and it's not something that I feel comfortable with doing, to the point of like, oh, all my friends are talking about it. Can we do something about that? And it's like, sure, but just so you know, all your friends are talking about it, meaning they have a head start, they're developing, they're able to monetize even some of the things that they're doing in the space.
I mean, you said something in the beginning that the digital identity is effectively even your persona, which is basically your email address.
Sure.
One of the barriers to entry in the digital space as it evolves, particularly to do with wallets, etc., is the UI UX of owning a wallet and the encryption keys that you have to store and the secret words and things like that. These are challenging. Mm-hmm. Things, for us, it's a walk in the park. We still have to be careful, because we have to make sure we don't make mistakes, because we can lose everything. But how can you see that evolving where it becomes more adoptable? Because people now, they're very used to just having an email address and a password.
Well, I mean, that's exactly it, right? So I just got back, well, not just, but a few weeks ago, got back from East Denver. And I would say the topic at hand and the words in everyone's mouths were account abstraction. How can we abstract a lot of the ways that we interact with, our digital identities and with our accounts today? Until, again, that's another kind of crucial thing to consider when we talk about adoption, right? Because to me, adoption is not, first of all, is not the early adopters. That is not adoption. That's people who like to take risks and like to get involved early, and want to experiment and feel okay with losing money if that's kind of, what they're putting into it, or time if that's what they're putting into it. In terms of being able to kind of generate any kind of real adoption, we need to consider some of the technical barriers to interacting in this space. I've always thought, and I'm not quite sure. I mean, I kind of change my feelings about this every once in a while, but I still think that there's going to be several different layers of, let's just call it the metaverse, just for, or Web3, whatever. And there's going to be a layer in which centralized institutions are going to provide the kind of interaction space for people who are not as comfortable with kind of taking ownership over their digital identities, to the degree of like setting up a MetaMask seed phrase, being able to protect that seed phrase in a way that is not going to be, kind of someone's going to take over that account or whatever, or take over your assets. So I've always thought that players like Coinbase are doing an excellent job at bridging the two, right? And if we look specifically at just finance, like TradFi and DeFi, I think Coinbase is kind of able to paint a gray area between the two. They have a foot in traditional finance, and they got a foot into decentralized finance. The problem starts to happen when you're a US company and you got to deal with US regulations, right? Because then there's only so much exposure they can have because they're a public company in the United States. So I think in terms of being able to, bring more people on this space, we're going to need to nurture those kind of gray players in the space of crypto, where they're not necessarily so deeply intertwined into the Web3 space as someone who would have their MetaMask and is using Uniswap or Aave to transact, right? Or to participate in some sort of like decentralized organization more completely because they're able to use the tools. There might be kind of a Coinbase for DAOs, right? Where organizations in the traditional space who don't have the time or aren't willing to take the risk to dive so deeply into understanding the DAO tooling, for them to be able to provide a DAO experience for their organization as easy as like bringing paychecks as your payroll provider, So those are my thoughts in terms of like how we could get some adoption outside of just the early adopters.
I mean, one of the things you talked about, this is an extension of, say, when you go to a bank and you want to get a bank account, get a mortgage, or get a loan, or even invest. Arriving there with your digital wallet, okay, and attached to that digital wallet is your digital identity in terms of your KYC information, your address, proof of where you live, your social security number, and all that sort of thing. How do you this is for the viewers to understand that wallet does it hold all the information that's relevant to that KYC, or does it prove that you've actually submitted that KYC information and they have to accept the fact that that token represents your identity and that you actually are good to go?
So just so I understand the question has to do with like your traditional banking system, or
Yes.
when you KYC in the decentralized finance system?
Well, let's start with the decentralized finance, first of all.
Sure. So in terms of doing like hard KYC, right? So I'll give a good example. Like if you go to Onto Wallet today, which is Ontology's identity wallet, which by the way, really cool, because I don't think many people are actually have anything close to that. And it just goes to show that Ontology has a pretty deep decentralized identity stack, because they have this identity wallet where as soon as you create a wallet, you're able to generate your decentralized identity along with it. And with that, you're able to start issuing credentials and earning reputation and so on and so forth. So it really takes advantage of the entire identity stack. You can also do hard KYC directly from the wallet. What does that mean? That means if you want to participate in certain platforms that require you to prove that you are who you say you are, right? Kind of more of a traditional finance type thing where you need to know your customer. Some exchanges have this, for instance. Then you need to provide a passport, right? Some sort of government issued credential. Ontology does not do the verification or the attestation for any of this. They actually work with some much larger organizations that actually service traditional finance systems. And so when you're proving your identity using government issued credentials, this information is then hashed. The result of that attestation is hashed, so encrypted, right? And then stored at the local level. That does not get put on chain because this type of information, personal identifiable information, should not live on chain, right? There's a few people that I know that do a fantastic job at talking about why you should not be putting this type of information on chain. I think it's pretty obvious for most of us to understand why, even if it's hashed, it's encrypted, but it's not, there's no need to have it on chain. So now you have ownership over that, not just that identity, but also that proof of your physical real world identity. How you can use that, you can go to a decentralized finance platform or some sort of centralized finance platform like an exchange that wishes to do business with you, or you wish to do business with them, excuse me. You're able to prove who you are by revealing information about yourself through this hashed attestation. If they say, for instance, what is your birthday? If that is the question at hand, if they say, are you over 21 to participate in this platform? The answer to that is actually not going to be your birthday. The answer to that is going to be a binary yes or no, because at the end of the day, the answer to that question is based on today's date and on when you were born. Are you over 21? I don't need to reveal that my birthday, which is a very private and sensitive piece of information, so that you can give me access. And if you trust the information that's being revealed to you, and again, if you look at how this information gets issued and attested, there is an issuer, there is a verifier, and there is a holder of these documents. So Ontology would be the issuer, the verifier could be an exchange, and the holder would be you. If you trust that Ontology's credentials and KYC is trustworthy, then I will give you passage to be able to participate in my ecosystem, because I have attested that you are who you say you are, and that you are, you've answered my questions truthfully. So I hope that answered your question in terms of how KYC works in the.
You've answered the question, because you now need this third-party verifier that needs to be able to hash to your wallet that you have complied with certain KYC protocols.
Yeah, and I mean, you can consider even like traditional universities being these issuers, right? So I, just completed a program at the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School of Business. They're going to issue me a certificate of completion. I can tell people that I did that, but there is no proof, right? I mean, a lot of people lie on their LinkedIn, right? Yeah. But what if I wanted to take it a step further and show provenance of the proof of work, basically, that I completed this? They could issue me a credential. They would be the issuer, right? And anybody that wishes to verify that information could simply look at the hash and say, okay, the provenance of this is from the contract of the University of Pennsylvania. So we can trust that the issuer is trustworthy, and we can trust that Humpty saying that he completed this program is trustworthy because it was issued by a reputable organization. So this is actually not even limited just to government issued credentials or even like just educational institutions. This could also be used for like medical implementations. It's actually quite kind of a very rich space for that's still largely untapped.
This is very, very interesting, because I remember the early days of tokenization. They were going down this route of digital identity, but it was very difficult because they were always looking at some form of centralized verification process in order to do that. But now the evolution of effectively not a token, but effectively a NFT, which is your unique identity, because everything is unique, is much more achievable than it was before. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, now I'll say DIDs and VCs are not NFTs. That is a completely different standard. It's a standard that, again, like I said, it is not even dependent on blockchain technology. Microsoft uses decentralized identifiers and you would never know it. Your accounts that are managed, and I'd say this as someone who was using Azure in my information technology days, you generate an account through their systems, it actually generates a DID along with it. So now you have this more interoperable identity that can be used outside of their systems too. So it is not dependent on the blockchain. Now, if you're talking about NFTs as your identity, certainly I think that, I think that there's a lot of different projects that are kind of experimenting with that. I think traditional PFP projects, you think about a Bored Ape, you know what the provenance is of that, for instance, because you know what smart contract issued it. So you can trust that NFT came from the original collection. And so me as the holder am who I claim to be as the digital persona. ENS is another example. They do domains, so name systems, right? Which in the traditional Web2 space would be like DNS, right? So my email, alchemy.io, that resolves to a long IP address that I don't need to remember. ONT.io, all of these different things resolve to an address. Same thing with ENS. It resolves a much more familiar name into a much more complex set of alphanumeric numbers. So yeah, I think that's an interesting thing. And they use NFTs for that, which are transferable, but much more sophisticated. One of the things that we experimented with last year was reputation NFTs, over at Ontology. We took something that they already had, which was the DeFi credit scoring system. And we took that to be more of a DAO credentialing system. We saw the emergence and the popularity of DAOs growing. We knew that there was going to be a need to be able to attest to completing certain activities, to participating in private conversations. How can you provision access to that? How can you prove that you've completed something? Well, you can, as an institution, as an organization, a DAO, you can create a set of challenges for your community to complete. And if they've actually completed it, this information lives on chain. We also provision off-chain data. So by mixing on-chain and off-chain data, we're able to verify that they've doing what they're saying they're doing, right? And then provide them with a reputation NFT. And this reputation NFT now is a brand new primitive that can be used in your community to provision access into private channels because, hey, these are your top contributors versus the top token holders, which I think is much more valuable. These are your top governors. Give them more weight when it comes to voting because they're the ones that are actively putting in the work. So yeah, it's really interesting. The novelty of NFTs has gone beyond, I think, just a pretty picture to something a lot more complex and usable
Yes.
in the Web3 space.
In terms of sovereign identity and what you're doing on Ontology, we're obviously dealing with individuals. Now, we're looking now in a world where if I'm doing business with a company in Indonesia or Thailand or Vietnam or Saudi Arabia or whatever, sometimes I need to do sort of my own due diligence on who that company is to make sure that that company actually exists and is it a company that delivers on what they say they're going to be delivering. Is there a way at Ontology where you've now taken that digital identity and now applied it to corporate entities?
Yeah, so one thing to realize about decentralized identifier, they are not just for people. And all it takes is a quick kind of perusing of ONT.io. So I would definitely recommend any of your listeners who are interested in learning more about decentralized identity and just the different kind of opportunities available to individuals and organizations. It's all right there. They have really wonderful documentation. So docs.ont.io actually too. In terms of decentralized identifiers, so DIDs, you can use these to provide an identity to a person. You can use this to provide an identity to an organization, or you can actually even use this to provide a identifier to an object. So in my home, I have so many smart appliances, right? It's just the nature of today's interconnected technology and electronics. I have a lot of devices in my home. If I wanted to be able to get better visibility into the interactions between them, into the activity, right? The usage, if I had decentralized identifiers for each of these objects, the Internet of Things, if you remember, that was the kind of all the big rage at one point, probably still is. And then I am able to get better insights into that relationship, right? Same goes for organizations. Organizations are entities as much as a person is an entity, right? So providing an organization with a decentralized identifier and then generating credentials on top of it as proofs of what they've done allows me as the customer to verify, right, in a trustless manner that they are, firstly, who they claim to be, right? Secondly, they've done what they've claimed to do. And the cool thing about this is beyond having some recorded proof of completion of something, now I'm able to also generate reputation as an organization. So as an organization, I can say my trajectory from the very beginning has been going up, not just based on financials, right? The money that I've been able to make, but also customer satisfaction, right? My customers rate us as one of the best at doing X. Yeah. All of this is now provable using decentralized reputation too.
That's very exciting. It's an area that I'm very interested in understanding a little bit more about, and we'll love to talk to you a little bit more on that. But in talking about, you mentioned a few times Metaverse, and this is a space that is hot. But essentially, if you can explain to the users, first of all, the Metaverse is a very broad term. Everybody thinks that the Metaverse effectively means that, okay, in order to enter the Metaverse, I need to wear these goggles, made famous by our dear friends at that big company in Silicon Valley, in Seattle. So what we need to do is understand that how does the Metaverse bridge between that and the real world in terms of identity?
So I use Metaverse interchangeably with Web3, and I shouldn't. Because I think that there is a difference between the two. It's a little more nuanced. But the Metaverse really is, the world in which we can live digitally, right? Some may say that operating in a DAO is kind of the Metaverse because we don't really necessarily know these people. There's all these virtual identities, like I have an NFT and that is the symbol of who I am. And in these DAOs, they see that little image and they go, oh, that's Humpty, right? Or I'm in some governance platform, it's the same little NFT that follows me everywhere. Oh, that's Humpty. That's Humpty. Or my ENS, for instance. But more traditionally, I think the Metaverse is mostly considered virtual worlds. So you can think of and I think you were talking about what Meta intends to do. I'm not sure how effective or well they're doing with that vision. But there's a lot of players in the space that have done this for a long time and just have such a solid world that you could participate in. Sandbox, I think, for anybody who's interested in kind of exploring the metaverse, if you will, is a wonderful one to look at. They've been around for quite some time, and they've built a lot of really interesting experiences using land. Decentraland would also be another metaverse world that has been created by these developers who wish to create a immersive experience for you. You can explore, but the interesting is you don't need virtual reality to participate in the metaverse. Surely it's a lot more immersive, right? The embodiment in that experience is very different because now you physically see the world in its digital beauty, right? Even if it's just a bunch of pixels and polygons and squares, you are able to explore that in a 3D space. I think that's, to me, was one of the more convincing things about the metaverse early when I started. I started to build a company in the metaverse back in 2015, I think. And it was just very hard to get any traction at that point. It was still very early. This is pre-Meta when what is it called? Oculus was a separate company, and I was using terrible goggles that made me dizzy. But the point I'm trying to make is the metaverse is, right now very fractured too. Like I said, there's different players that are creating different worlds. I look forward to the day where you can actually jump through a porthole within one of these worlds and pop out into the other one, I know one of the organizations that was looking at that was Artifact. They got acquired by Nike, so I'm not quite sure where they're at in that, but they're the ones that developed the clone. That's the NFT project, but they also were creating a metaverse where you can live in a world that was 3D space and you can jump between worlds through portholes. So it would be interesting at some point, there'd be a portal that said, enter the sandbox world here, and I'd go to sandbox. And I think when you build in that interoperability, it's a lot more fun.
Yes. That moves on to quite conveniently to avatars, because avatars yourself can exist in the metaverse and you can interact with other people in that space. But then I want to bring it back to digital identity, of whether or not an avatar can have a legal standing on its own, or is it a representation of yourself and the distinct identity that it has and interaction with other avatars. What, in your opinion, is the legal status of something like this?
So I think that there are, at least here in the US, I can't speak, about things happening outside of the US. Probably there's more movement outside of the US, to be honest. Yeah. There's a lot of regulation recently here that I feel is stagnating a bit of growth and innovation. But there have been a couple of states that have, been pretty progressive and are creating laws that recognize digital entities, right? So Wyoming is one. I believe the city of Miami, not the state of Florida. Florida is another one. These, nation states, right? So you can kind of consider them, right? They're state recognized entities are now recognizing digital entities, and I think that's a great start because it is with that type of recognition that we're able to start bridging the two worlds. We're able to provide the benefits to the traditional space from the innovation happening in the virtual space, and vice versa. You can bring some of that structure that has been working for hundreds of years in the traditional space into the virtual space, because I think the virtual space and the Web3 space is a little immature still. We could benefit from systems and processes that have been defined in the traditional space. Sure, I don't think that we want it to be too processed, otherwise we limit innovation. But I think we do need to kind of think through things a little bit more structurally, and I think we can benefit if we can borrow from the two. So I think with the recognition of digital entities at the organizational level, I think the next obvious step is to recognize digital identities in the traditional world, where I can show up to the DMV, right? So anybody in the United States probably knows what that is. It's a horrible experience where you go get your driver's license or other state issued identity and show up as a virtual persona and be able to have that be sufficient proof of who I am, and probably even better proof of who I am, because it's much more comprehensive. And I have ownership of all of that information anyway. So there's no need to have to wait a week or 2 weeks to then call up another institution. All of that I have in my digital passport. So I'm able to show that and prove that to someone.
Yes. So, I mean, hypothetically, if I have an avatar of myself, but then I let loose in a metaverse based on AI, so it can interact with people purely based on a data set that I've given it. And it behaves and say starts defaming somebody. Is it the avatar that is going to be sued, or will it be the owner of the avatar?
So I'll try to use an example of something I'm familiar with instead of just speculating. So one of the questions about decentralized identity that has come up in the decentralized finance space is, how can I trust this identity? How can I trust his reputation? Because someone could say they could have multiple identities, right? I already claimed I have more than 10 identities, right, that I use in the Web3 space. How can I know for sure that you are who you claim to be because you're using this identity, but I don't know all the other stuff you've done, right? So to your point of one persona having done terrible things, how can you be certain that that person behind the avatar is trustworthy? I would say and this is what I've said in the past in terms of decentralized identity and decentralized finance, is reputation really kind of is a process, or is a calculation, a score that needs to be defined by the organization to try to understand if the person, the individual, the entity, that identity is of value to your platform. And if, for instance, you were to say this identity that you just created is too new, I need to know that you've actually been participating in this ecosystem for over a year. Okay, that's starting to restrict and gate access to your platform, but you're expecting a certain level of reputation. Well, say you have two identities. You have one that you're going to keep clean in case anything happens and you want to like restart. So you've had it for over a year, but you're going out and doing degenerate stuff with another identity. You put it into an AI machine where it now just started to do things that it shouldn't. You decide to take this clean identity and go in. Well, the system might say, well, it's fine and dandy that you have over a year of ownership of this identity, but it doesn't have enough work. Where's the work? So you can see how the organization can start to layer what type of individual and reputation they want from the people participating in their platform. So it might be less valuable to you now to do degenerate stuff with that identity that has actually been participating in this ecosystem, has an amazing history. But now, if you brought that identity to that same platform, it goes, oh, wonderful, you've owned it for over a year, you have all this work, but what the F is all this stuff you recently did? That is not at all the type of individual we want. So I think, when you consider the layered reputation that you can apply to people participating in your platforms, there is almost that self-selecting of what we choose to do with our identities in this space. And I think, instead of stick is more of a carrot, is like the incentives need to be aligned for that individual to want to perform well, to behave, to, be reputable in this space.
Yeah. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground, Humpty, and this has been a really, really extraordinary education for myself and hopefully our viewers. And I certainly would like to bring you back for another session another time, because there's a lot of things to cover, because it's a complex subject, but it has so much meaning to people because it's going to have a major impact on people's lives going forward. And the more that we can inform people and make them feel rest assured that it's an evolution rather than a revolution, I'm quite sure that we'll have lots to talk about. So in terms of engagement, you're head of community at Ontology. What's the best way for our viewers to get hold of you?
Yeah, so for me personally, Twitter is the best platform. I'm at Humpty Calderon on Twitter, and I would say I'm fairly active there. For Ontology, if you go to the website, ont.io, all the links are there. I'm usually in the Discord more than anything else because I use that platform a little more than Telegram. But, if you go to any of Ontology's social channels, I'll probably be there and you can DM me and happy to chat. I mean, this is the stuff I love and live for in this space now. So the conversations are just as important for me than for anybody else.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for your time. And I really, really appreciate you sharing your insights on such an amazing subject of digital identity. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
If you're interested in knowing more about citiesabc.com with openbusinesscouncil.org and fashionabc.org, go to our platforms, as well as you can also find me on social media. You can DM me, Hilton Supra, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And do go to other interviews that we have done on YouTube. And don't forget to like and comment. Thank you very much for your time and engaging with us today with the interviews on Citiesabc.